House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. Sergeant at Arms.
The House is now in session. All persons not entitled to privileges on the floor, please retire to the gallery.
The members will rise and be led in prayer by the Reverend William A. Harmon, Senior Pastor, King of Glory Lutheran Church, Williamsburg, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, led by the gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Blessings to you from your friends at King of Glory Lutheran Church in Williamsburg, New Kent, and around the world. From Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. We pray. Almighty God, creator of all things, we come before you this day, offering you all the praise and glory for your steadfast love and mercy upon us, your creation. All that we have, all that we are, all that we ever hope to be is because of you, our Lord and God. Savior of the nations, we pray your hand of grace upon this prestigious body and those who have been elected to serve on behalf of your people, including the Senate, the judiciary, the governor, and all your servants in our land. May the work of this body be pleasing to you, and may they be guided by your word to act justly, love kindness, and walk humbly with you. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh upon every citizen of the Commonwealth. Increase their faith, protect them, support them, and guide them in your ways. Gracious God, may we be a people who daily pick up our crosses and follow you, for you are the way, the truth, and the life. Hear our prayers for the sake of your people as we ask them in your most holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know. We got to
The members will answer the roll call by indicating their presence on the electronic voting board.
On those. Thank you.
The clerk will close the roll.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Pursuant to House Rule 3, I've examined and approved the Journal of the House of Delegates for February 17th, 2016. Motions and resolutions under Rule 39 are now in order. Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
Not at this time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Richmond City, Mr. Lapasi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rise for the purpose of introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, in the gallery this morning are members of the Links Incorporated, representing every corner of the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Links Incorporated is one of the nation's oldest and largest volunteer service organizations of extraordinary women who are committed to enriching, sustaining, and ensuring the culture and economic survival of African Americans and other persons of African ancestry. The members are influential decision makers and hardworking, driven leaders. Please join me in welcoming the ladies in green and white from the Links Incorporated today.
We're very pleased to have the visitors with us today and hope that you enjoy your time at the Capitol. The gentlewoman from Westmoreland, Ms. Ranson.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, it is my pleasure to introduce students from the Northumberland Elementary School Gifted Program. The Northumberland Public Schools provide students who are identified as talented and gifted with opportunities to advance their knowledge and increase their academic and visual and performing arts abilities. These students work after school in programs such as community problem solvers, scenario writing, STEM tech clubs, and robotics through our Dahlgren Naval Base. Currently, these students are working on an outreach project with the Haven Women's Shelter to raise awareness about domestic violence and homelessness. Gifted students also have great opportunities like this one today to enhance their learning in a real-world atmosphere. Mr. Speaker, our community is so proud of these students and the teachers that are making commitments now to volunteer and give back. I'm thrilled to have them with us in the gallery today, and I'd ask that we give them a warm welcome.
We're delighted to have the students from Northumberland with us today, and welcome to the Capitol. The gentleman from Henrico, Mr. Bagby.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to draw your attention to the gallery where we have standing the Henrico boys basketball team. Henrico boys basketball team capped off an outstanding season by winning the 2015 VHSL Group 5A State Championship, which is an awesome accomplishment. But the seniors that are with us today don't know a Henrico High School that did not play in the state championship, because they have been in the state championship every year for the past 3 years and are well on their way to playing in the state championship this year after they beat Deep Run. Delegate Farrell, that was for you. After they beat Deep Run, they defeated a talented team from Norview in the city of Norfolk by a score of 78-64 in the championship. They also have a number of seniors that are from the last year's season and this year's season that have gone on to universities like University of Richmond and Tennessee and Virginia State. And so I know that the coach is really proud, as he is the state coach of the year. I know the coach is really proud of not only their accomplishment on the basketball court, but also their distinguished display of character and their ability to earn those honor roll grades. And so I am very thrilled to say, behold the green and gold, and welcome the boys basketball team of Henrico High School to the General Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We're pleased to have the team with us today, and congratulations on all your accomplishments. Well deserved. The gentlewoman from Sussex, Ms. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of a request.
The gentlewoman has the floor.
On page 15 of the calendar, may House H.R. Resolution 142 commending Mars Hill Zion Church be called out of order.
Clerk will report a resolution.
House Resolution 142, commending Mars Hill African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church.
The gentleman from Sussex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the resolution be approved.
The questions on adoption of the resolution, as many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The resolution is agreed to. The gentlewoman from James City County, Ms. Pogge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning's prayer was offered by the Reverend Bill Harmon. Reverend Harmon is the senior pastor and executive director of King of Glory Lutheran Church and the Central Region Vice President of the Southeastern District Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. Bill is a gifted communicator and has been a presenter of various conferences and seminars, including the National Youth Gathering of the Lutheran Church. He challenges and encourages people to always take a 360 view of their situation and to focus on learning from each challenge they face. Bill and his wife, Gail, live in Williamsburg, Virginia, with their 3 sons. Please give them a warm house welcome.
The gentleman from Henrico, Mr. O'Bannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rise for an announcement.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is actually an announcement, an invitation, and an opportunity. Monday the 29th will be the 60th anniversary of your Virginia War Memorial's rededication, original dedication, which was on a leap day in 1956. So we're going to celebrate that down at the War Memorial at 5 o'clock. We were also, at that time, going to dedicate the plaza there to somebody that most of us know and knew well. That's Frank Hargrove. Now, Frank was the chairman of that board for about 13 years, and all of us know Frank dearly and remember him for all of the many things unique things he did for this General Assembly. So I hope everybody will be getting a letter today inviting you to attend that, and attached to that letter will be this little return envelope, which has already got a stamp on it. So I would respectfully request that you consider making a donation to that endeavor and to your war memorial in honor of Frank Hargrove. And the speaker's going to be giving the comments. Thank you.
The gentlewoman from Richmond City, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a request and an introduction.
The gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the gentleman reflect that my seatmate, the gentlewoman from Hampton, is away today due to pressing personal business?
The journalist will reflect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, today joining us in House Room 3 are students and families from the Virginia Science, Technology, Engineering, and Applied Mathematics, also known as the STEAM Academy's Summer STEAM program. This competitive week-long summer program invites high-ability, high-potential students from across the state to study STEAM topics with field experts, including leading faculty from universities, middle schools, and high schools. This is the 4th year Summer STEAM has been recognized by the Virginia Science and Mathematics Consortium as a program that works. Please join me in welcoming these students and their families from Virginia STEAM Academy.
Thank you. The gentleman from Augusta, Mr. Landis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, on behalf of the gentleman from Stanton, Delegate Bell, and the gentleman from Rockbridge, Delegate Klein, it's my honor to introduce today a group from the Valley, and I'm going to ask them to stand. We have with us in the gallery the Lincas, with the Kiwanis Club, Lincas Bosserman Model General Assembly from the Shenandoah Valley. This group was actually, the General Assembly was started back during the bicentennial in 1976. They are led by Farrah Morrison, Forrest Bergdorf, and Nick Stevens. I should have brought my glasses. And these young women represent Stanton, Waynesboro, and Augusta County. More importantly, Mr. Speaker, they're learning the legislative process today. We have with us the Speaker, the Governor. I always tell them the Speaker is the most important position in my mind, but they have with them the Governor, the Lieutenant Governor, and Committee Chairman, and also the Attorney General. So I hope the House will welcome them to the House today.
We welcome the students with us today. Don't you believe for a moment what he said. The most important person down here is the chairman of the Education Committee. The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Kreisig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
Mr.
Speaker, members of the House, joining us today, they're not in the gallery, but they are in the, I think in the overflow room, are members of the Mount Vernon Lee Chamber of Commerce, of which I'm a very proud member. They are celebrating their 66th year. The Chamber has been the premier business organization to represent both Mount Vernon and the Lee districts in Fairfax County. Today, the Chamber provides over 425 participating businesses the opportunity for growth, increased visibility, access to community leaders, influence on important community decisions, and opportunities to give back to make our Mount Vernon and Lee communities a better place to work. The Mount Vernon Lee Chamber of Commerce has been a major player in several initiatives that strengthen the vitality of the Greater Richmond Highway Corridor. It supported the BRAC moves to Fort Belvoir and worked to facilitate the selection of Fort Belvoir as home of the National Museum of the United States Army. I ask that we please give the Mount Vernon Lee Chamber of Commerce a warm house welcome.
The gentleman from Alexandria, Mr. Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I believe in the chamber today are members of the Parent Leadership Training Institute of the City of Alexandria. If they're here, could they please rise? I don't see them, but I know they're in the Capitol today. and I do want to tell the body a little bit about the work they do. Parents obviously have tremendous concerns for their children on their health, their community, their schools, but they don't always know how to advocate on their children's behalf. The Parent Leadership Training Institute of Alexandria provides help to these parents and parents throughout Northern Virginia, teaching them about the democratic process, who they need to go to when they have a problem with their children, and I ask that the House give them a warm house welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Hugo.
Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to introduce men that are helping on an issue of Lyme disease, incredibly important to our Commonwealth. These Virginians invented and are providing a game-changing diagnostic for Lyme disease that plagues our area in Northern Virginia and across the state. Dr. Chip Petricone is an inventor of the nanotrap technology at George Mason, and Ross Dunlap is the CEO of Sierras Nanoscience, located and growing in Prince William County. This company is now offering direct Lyme antigen tests of a non-invasive sample that will reduce the number of false negatives and false positives, an issue we've dealt with on this House floor on issues. I hope that it'll be the will of the body, that they would rise, be the will of the body. We give them a warm House welcome and thank them for their help in combating Lyme disease in the Commonwealth.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rise for an announcement.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I want to thank everybody who came out last week for our inaugural meeting of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus. We had a really good turnout and very good discussion and presentation by our State Parks Director and also the Deputy Director of DCR on the role of state parks, not only in our economy, but also in terms of giving our families an economical way to go ahead and spend time together and enjoy nature. Tonight, I hope you'll be able to join us for our second meeting, which is a reception at the Virginia Credit Union building on 8th Street. So starting at 5 o'clock and going till 6:30, we'll be serving up ribs from Buzz and Ned's, as well as enjoying craft beer donated by the Virginia Craft Beer Guild. I hope you'll be able to join us this evening. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Culpeper, Mr. Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I'd like to tell you all a little bit about a fellow, I guess I shouldn't say veteran because he's still on active duty, but his name is Sergeant First Class Charles Martland. And Sergeant First Class Martland is an active duty soldier right now that I think needs the help of pretty much all Americans, but especially the people in this body that have some influence with respect to the process by which he is currently being considered for discharge. Sergeant First Class Martland served in the same battalion I did in 3rd Battalion, 1st Special Forces Group. He did multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the reason why he is going to be discharged at this point was because 4 years ago in Afghanistan, a small boy came up to him and pleaded to him for help, along with his mother. This small boy had been tied to a post and brutalized repeatedly for days by an Afghan police officer. And so Sergeant First Class Martland approached this individual with his commanding officer, along with the child and the mother. They laughed off the accusation. They laughed at him, they laughed at this child that had been, again, tied to a post and brutally raped for days. So Sergeant First Class Martland, upon seeing this reaction for the officer, proceeded to punish him for it. He beat him. And that, in the eyes of the current powers that be within the United States military and the administration, is reason for him to be drummed out of the military. Ladies and gentlemen, the motto of U.S. Army Special Forces Green Berets is De Oppresso Liber, to free the oppressed, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their nationality, their religious convictions. It's to free the oppressed. And you need to understand something about the way Green Berets operate. At 2 combat tours in Iraq, I spent more time with the indigenous population than I did with Americans. We build relationships, we build trust. It gets to a point where you're not just over there fighting for our Constitution and fighting for our citizens, you're fighting for the people in that neighborhood that you have built this relationship with. They are your family as well. And I will tell you, as many of the people in this room who are combat veterans can probably attest, and many people in law enforcement as well, you do not truly appreciate evil when you look at it. You appreciate what it is when it looks back. And the question that every service member has to come into contact with when that episode happens is, what are you going to do about it? And Sergeant First Class Martland confronted evil. He punished it. He demonstrated to evil, he demonstrated to that boy and his mother that someone was going to be willing to stand up for them. Somebody was going to be willing to face the consequences that could have arisen from this and defend this boy when nobody else would. And our response now as a country and a military is going to be to drum him out? Maybe there are some that feel that what he did was excessive. I personally do not. But I will tell you this, we should be very, very careful at the message that we send to the men and women that we expect to go overseas and put their bodies, themselves, in harm's way, to stand in between the innocent and those who would exploit and destroy them. Because when you have signified to them that you will not have their back as soon as it becomes politically inconvenient, that as soon as it may look bad in the press, you're going to abandon them, don't expect a military that is going to continue to go over there and put everything on the line, give up all of their tomorrows, miss anniversaries, birthdays, Christmases, Thanksgiving, away from their families, from their women, from their wives, from their children, from their husbands. He is owed our loyalty. He demonstrated it to us year after year. And quite frankly, I think it demonstrates something to be proud of when a small child in a foreign country that doesn't speak the same language, that barely knows this person, is willing to come up to them and sees that flag on his shoulder as a symbol of someone that he can go to for protection. And now we've just told not only the people that perpetrated this atrocity against this small boy, we've told the small boy too, don't count on it, because we'll punish them if they do so. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be defended by a military that when they are confronted with evil like that, their response is not fear, it's not equivocation, it is to confront it with violence if necessary. I think Sergeant First Class Martland deserves our support. He is currently right now undergoing his second appeal. As far as any influence that you have with congressional delegations within the Department of the Army, I would encourage you to please stand by this man. He has stood by us, and he has stood by the people of Afghanistan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I have one thing I want to add. I am not going to tolerate interviews that interrupt the morning hour talks. I don't want any more live interviews on the floor like this, okay? You can take them to another room, you can take them out, but do not be disrupting what's going on here. Gentlewoman from Newport News, Ms. Price.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you. Today, I add to the stories of courage and inspiration that my colleagues have shared to celebrate Black History Month. An important piece to properly celebrating our Black history is to celebrate those who have made our Commonwealth proud. And today, I'm focusing on someone who is an inspiration and has made strides in the STEM careers. Katherine Johnson was a little girl who loved to count. Growing up, as she recalls, I counted everything. I counted the steps to the road. I counted the steps to the church. Anything that could be counted, I did. She knew her love for numbers would be entrenched in her life's work. She graduated high school at the age of 14 and completed college at 18 as she prepared to be a research mathematician. During World War II, the National Advisory Committee of Aeronautics, later to be known as NASA, expanded their hiring efforts of women to include Black women. The women they hired did such a great job, they were allowed to keep their jobs after the war. By 1953, there was huge demand in the early stages of space research, and Black women were hired as computers at Langley Research Center's Guidance and Navigation Department, where Ms. Johnson found her niche. Three of the many fascinating highlights of Johnson's career include her calculating the trajectory for Alan Shepard, the first American in space. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Katherine Johnson's mathematic capabilities impacted the first steps of our country's journey into space. And later, John Glenn requested that she personally recheck the calculations for his flight aboard Friendship 7, even though they had begun using electronic calculators. She was instrumental in that mission, on which he became the first American to orbit the Earth. Further, the success of the Apollo moon landing program and the start of the Space Shuttle program were hinged on her calculations. On Tuesday, November 24th, 2015, Katherine Johnson received the nation's highest civilian award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Obama. And she also can add to her recognitions House Joint Resolution 162 from this body. Ladies and gentlemen, Katherine Johnson is a feisty, generous, and caring resident of Hampton, Virginia, and a diamond member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Lambda Omega chapter. She truly embodies the saying that little girls with dreams become women of vision. Let us celebrate this living legend, her intellect, her character, her determination, and her quiet confidence. And let us thank her for her service to this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlewoman from Fairfax, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
It's been a while. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I believe in our Constitution and the equality of all people under the law. But I know that I would not be standing here today as an elected official except for the many courageous women who have fought for women's equality since the beginning of this great country, including Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Women had to march. They had to go on hunger strikes. They had to lobby our leaders just to gain the right to vote. And it took us until 1920 to pass the 19th Amendment to enfranchise women in this country. It took until 1963 for us to pass an Equal Pay Act that ensured that women were paid the same as men for equal work. It took us until 1972 when our U.S. Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment, a constitutional amendment to ensure women have equal protection under the law. And sadly, it took until 2009 with the Lilly Ledbetter Act to stand up for women, to protect women when they aren't paid equally. The U.S. Constitution is the foundation on which all law sits. And I believe the Equal Rights Amendment is basic to our democracy. To borrow from what Justice Scalia said when talking about sex, he said, certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination on the basis of sex. The only issue is whether it prohibits it. And he said it doesn't. The ERA fixes that. It simply says that equality of rights under the law shall not be abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. We have spent years working for less pay than our male counterparts, and every woman's rights are compromised because even today, women only make 77 cents for every dollar a man is paid. And that number is shockingly lower for women of color. With the number of women working outside the home, with the number of women who are bearing the heaviest burden of being sole support for families, this is just wrong. It means that women have less money on retirement. It means that they have less in Social Security. It means that we will have less to cover our medical needs. And that is not a liberal woman's issue. It is not a Republican issue. It is not a Democratic issue. It is about wanting equal pay for equal work, and it is a fundamental human right. Virginia is one of only 22 states that added a gender equality clause to our own Constitution, and yet we are one of 22 states that has still failed to ratify the ERA amendment. It simply doesn't reconcile. It has been 44 years. The Equal Rights Amendment simply affirms our determination to ensure that women will be treated equally. In recent years, it's passed over in our Senate, I understand, 5 times, and yet we have an equal body, but in the history of the House of this delegates, we have yet to have this debate. And I believe the ERA deserves the dignity of a debate in the House of Delegates. And I ask that we do this. Many of us are blessed to have daughters. I myself have 5. I want to be able to tell my daughters and my granddaughters that we cared enough about them and we cared about their future and we were not afraid to address this issue. I want to tell them that just as I sat in the gallery above the House of Congress the day that they voted for this Equal Rights Amendment, that I can say that I stood here on this floor in this House of Delegates when we debated this amendment. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice of the Supreme Court, said, if I could choose just one amendment to add to the Constitution, it would be the Equal Rights Amendment. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, on behalf of the women of Virginia, I ask that we move forward and we have a debate on ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction and a request.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, first the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we have visiting us today in the gallery communities and schools, students from Chesterfield, Petersburg, and Richmond Public Schools. Community in Schools is the largest dropout prevention program in the nation. We are fortunate that such an effective program is here in Virginia. Community in Schools has 8 affiliates across Virginia, including every corner of the Commonwealth from Southwest to Hampton Roads to Northern Virginia, and here in Central Virginia and Richmond and Petersburg, and I've had a chance to visit the Petersburg program, which is outstanding. Since 2012, Communities in Schools has more than doubled the number of students, served over 30,000 children. In 2015 alone, 75% of tracked CIS students improved their attendance, 82% improved their academics, 92% were promoted to the next grade. So, Mr. Speaker, I think they're up in the gallery. I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to give the Community in Schools students a warm round of applause.
We're delighted to have the members from the Community Schools visiting with us today.
Mr. Speaker, the request, Mr. Speaker, I would request permission to take center aisle for a presentation. I would ask if I could, this is for Charles Haley, so if I could ask my JMU alumni, if you're a 49er fan, more importantly, if you're a Cowboy fan, if you're a member of the Redskin Pride Caucus, please stay in your seat.
That was kind of unnecessary. The gentleman from Colonial Heights.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is my pleasure to welcome Charles Haley to the House of Delegates to honor him for being the first JMU alumnus named to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. On February 9th, we passed HJ 268 celebrating Charles's accomplishments. Charles is joined by all kinds of people. Karen Haley, his mom Virginia, his daughter Brianna, a lot of people, brothers, et cetera, is up in the audience. We also have President Alger, and I think Charlie King. Is Charlie here? Charlie's here, so it's great to have them with us. Do we have Coach McMillan here? Coach McMillan's up in the gallery. He was actually the coach when I was at JMU and did a wonderful job, so welcome Coach McMillan here. Charles has had an incredible football career. It started in high school when he played against our own Jeff Finch, who of course dominated him, but then he went after that failure. He went on to JMU, where he was a 4-year starter. He set the school record for career tackles with 506 from 82 to 85. He was named an All-American twice, most valuable defensive player 3 times, elected to the JMU Hall of Fame. In the NFL, he's the only player to have earned 5 Super Bowl championship rings. He was selected to the Pro Bowl 5 times, named 2-time National Football Conference Defensive Player of the Year. He played with the San Francisco 49ers from 86 to 91, where he won 2 Super Bowls, Super Bowl 23 and 24, and then he got smart and went to the Dallas Cowboys, where he won Super Bowls in 92, 93, 95, and if I can say, being a rabid Cowboy fan, everybody tells you it was Aikman and Emmitt Smith and Michael Irving who was the difference. This guy was the difference as a Cowboy fan. While we won 3, we beat Buffalo twice badly, and then we beat Pittsburgh. And so thank you for making me a very happy man in the 1990s. Hasn't been so good since then. Charles in his 12-year NFL career in 1999. He continues to do a lot of good work in the community, and this is probably what I think he would like for us to emphasize the most. He's an active mentor for rookies on the San Francisco 49ers and Dallas Cowboys. He works with a lot of charitable organizations like the Jubilee Family Development Center and the Salvation Army. So today, Mr. Speaker, the House presents Charles with House Joint Resolution 268 to commemorate his astounding career, and I think Tony Wilt has that. So Charles, on behalf of the House, thank you for being such a great citizen and such a great alumni of so many great institutions like JMU.
We're delighted to have Mr. Haley with us today. He brings credit to the Commonwealth. Thank you for being here. The gosh, they're all gone. Gentlewoman from Fairfax, Ms. Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an announcement.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
May I wait a moment, please? I don't want to compete with the celebrity.
Yeah, we don't want anybody to miss this. You might want to wait a minute. The business of the Commonwealth never stops. Gentleman may continue.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this will be the last time that I try to shame you into contributing to ARC's food and warm clothing drive. Many of you have been really generous, but some of you might have a credit union red scarf or an extra umbrella from a bank that you could give away. So until the evening, until tonight, I will have the boxes out. Room 707, please come by. Thank you. Hey, thank you, seatmate.
The gentleman from Stanton, Mr. Bell.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a request.
The gentleman has the floor.
May the journal reflect that my seatmate, the gentleman from Tazewell, is away on pressing personal business.
The journal so reflect. The gentleman from Frederick, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a request.
Gentleman may state it.
That the attendance roll reflect that the gentleman from Prince William County is away today on pressing personal business.
Journal will so reflect. The gentleman from Hanover, Mr. Fowler.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the purpose of a request and an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, may the journal reflect that my seatmate, the gentleman from Poquoson, is away on pressing personal business.
Journal will so reflect.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, join us in the Capitol today, and I'm hoping they've made their way up to the gallery, or some exchange students from Hanover County's Attlee High School. The students are from Belgium, France, Germany, and Italy, and they are joined by one of their host families in Hanover, Ms. Melissa Ball and her daughter Sarah. It is my hope that the members of the House will give our visitors from Europe a warm House welcome.
We're pleased to have the visitors wherever they might be. The gentleman from Fairfax, Ms. Boysko.
I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Yesterday, Delegate Price, Delegate Robinson, Delegate Fowler hosted a reception recognizing the great-great-granddaughter of Elizabeth Cady Staton. That reminds us all, and we've already heard from Ms. Murphy, about the Equal Rights Amendment. I believe it has been 35 years since it was last discussed on this floor, and I wanted to bring it up again as well. We can I believe that each person in this room can think of a woman in their family who they're close to, who has had the wool pulled out from under them, basically tearing their lives apart, where they are left to depend on themselves. And I can certainly use my own personal family story. My mother was raised with the attitude that she was never going to have to find a job. There was going to be a man there to take care of her. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. She was left with 3 kids with no job, no money, no prospect. And she struggled and fought and worked hard, and she raised us beautifully. I was raised to make sure that I went to college, to make sure that I could take care of myself. And I came up to Virginia. I went to Hollins College, which is an all-women's college, and it has been my mission to work for equal rights for women and girls everywhere. And now I'm a mother of 2 daughters. When my girls go back to Alabama to visit with my grandparents, my mom and her husband wonder why they're working so hard. I'll tell you why they're working so hard. They are expected to go toe-to-toe with every boy in their community. And not only in the community, but we are looking at a global competition at this point. That brings me back to why I believe now is the time to talk about the Equal Rights Amendment. Because as Ms. Murphy just explained, we still are not on equal footing. And this isn't a Democrat or a Republican issue. This is an issue of competitiveness and of fairness and of reasonableness. We're expected here, all of us are paid equally. All of us have a seat at the table here in the General Assembly. And what a great example that is for the rest of the country. One of the discussions that I've heard is that because the ERA came up so long ago and it's been so long, that it's too late. Well, gentlemen and ladies of the gallery, I want to just bring to your attention the 27th Amendment of our United States Constitution was originally introduced September 25th, 1789. And does anyone in the room have an idea of when it passed? May 7th, 1992, more than 200 years later. I suggest that we do have time to bring it back up, to talk about it. I think it's important. I think it's important for our mothers who have worked so hard, our sisters. I definitely feel that way about my daughters, and I know a lot of you all do as well because we've had conversations about this. I'm ready to do the work that we need to do, and I ask you to join with me to bring this conversation back up so that we can work for our children in the future. Thank you.
The gentleman from Prince William, Mr. Lingenfelter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rise for a motion and an announcement and an introduction.
Gentleman has floor.
Trifecta. Mr. Speaker, I move that on page 1 and 2, Senate Bills 49, 610, and 715 are by for the day. And if I could explain, the Senate yesterday passed our 3 bills out of their committee, but it didn't make their calendar today. It will show up tomorrow on their calendar, and so it'll be on final vote on Monday. So if we approve these tomorrow, procedurally, they'll be dealt with Monday as well. So that's my motion, Mr. Speaker.
And so you want to go
Bye for the
how
day.
long?
Bye for the day.
Without objection, Senate Bill 49, Senate Bill 610, and Senate Bill 715 by for the day.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and just an announcement, if I may.
Gentlemen may have
tonight, you've received a flyer. The Redskins Pride Caucus is going to be meeting tonight at and you'll see on your flyer at the Southern Railroad Tap House, where there will be your favorite players and the coaches from the NFC champions. And please, Mr. Speaker, do not give the gentleman from Suffolk any rebuttal time on this announcement, if you would, please. And finally, Mr. Speaker, an introduction.
Beg pardon?
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, if the cadets from VMI would rise, please, and be recognized. These young men and women have, this is their day to storm the Hill and talk to you and share with you the tremendous opportunities that they've had at VMI. We're very honored to have them here with us. And on behalf of Delegate Klein and myself, we would ask you to welcome them. And also remember that tonight from 6 to 8 in the Library of Virginia, they will have a reception for you, so please try to swing by there before you go to the Redskins Pride event. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask the House to give them a warm welcome.
We're very pleased to have the cadets from VMI with us today. We thank you for what you do. Glad to have you here today. Thank you. The gentlewoman from Alexandria, Ms. Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a request, a motion, and introduction.
Gentlewoman has floor.
I ask that HJ 316 be taken out of order.
Clerk will report a resolution.
House Joint Resolution number 316 commending George Mason University.
Gentlewoman from Alexandria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a George Mason University alumni, I'm proud to say that this institution has grown from a commuter school filled with temporary classrooms and trailers to a flagship university and has recently joined an elite group of institutions throughout the nation. Not only have the GMU professors received 2 Nobel Prizes in economics, one of the major reasons that I majored in economics at that university, but it has also been recently ranked as one of the top research institutions in the country by the Carnegie Classification of Institutions of Higher Education, exceeding one of the nation's Ivy League institutions whose actually ranking fell. Mr. Speaker, this would not be possible without the support of this assembly, the leadership of the university's presidents, and the board of visitors over the years. And in the gallery today, we have the pleasure of being joined by GMU's president, Dr. Angel Cabrera. And I ask that he stand and that we all congratulate him and give him a warm house welcome. And Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of the resolution.
The questions on adoption of the resolution, as many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Resolution is agreed to. And we're delighted to have Dr. Carreras with us today. We thank you for all that you do for George Mason as well as Virginia. Thank you for being. The gentleman from Loudon, Mr. Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an announcement and an introduction.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I've spoken a couple times on the floor in the last week about the big basketball game that's coming next week against the Senate. I know that they are prone to bring professional athletes in to play against us, which is usually unfair. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Today's announcement is not about that. Today's announcement is about raising money for cancer. If you remember what this basketball game is all about, it's about supporting the Massey Cancer Center. I think one of the most important competitions between us and the Senate over the next week is who can raise more money. We're going to beat them on the basketball court. Our pages are going to beat them in the stands, but we've got to beat them in raising money. So if you are willing and you can donate to the Massey Cancer Center, please bring a check by my office or give it to me here on the House floor. The last thing I want to do is stand up and say the Senate outraised us when it came to cancer. So please help and donate. And Mr. Speaker, an introduction?
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the other members of the Loudon delegation, I'd like to introduce a great group from Leadership Loudon and ask them to stand if they're in the gallery. Mr. Speaker, Leadership Loudon is a 9-month program focused on developing community leaders, and 2016 marks the 25th anniversary of this fantastic group. Today, there are over 500 Leadership Loudon alumni working in public and private sector jobs around the county. They serve local government, nonprofits. They lead some of our top companies in Loudoun County, and I couldn't be more proud to introduce them today. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that you help me give Leadership Loudon a warm House welcome. Thank you.
We're pleased to have the members from Leadership Loudon visiting with us today. Hope you enjoy your time in the Capitol. Gentleman from Williamsburg, Mr. Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an announcement.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, we all know how vitally important tourism is to the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, not just down in my area, but it generates over $22 billion worth of revenue across the entire state, generates upwards of $1.5 billion in local and state taxes, and accounts for about 217,000 jobs in the state. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have generally had a vibrant and energetic tourism caucus, but the unusual snow day on that Friday tripped us up a little bit. So we're getting back on track, and just wanted, on behalf of the gentleman from Virginia Beach, Delegate Villanueva, wanted to stand and just make sure everyone knows Friday, 9 o'clock, the 5th floor West conference room. We'll have Rita McClenny, the president of the Virginia Tourism Corporation, and other industry leaders. We'd like you all to join us and come by if you can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Culpeper, Mr. Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today with us, I think they're not quite in the gallery yet. They're probably still over on the Senate side. Those guys keep everyone late. We have the Office of Youth from Orange County, Virginia. The Office of Youth is comprised of student leaders that assist with the Board of Supervisors and different local government in order to address youth issues within the community. They've been around since 1987 and have done a lot of great work, and I hope it'll be the pleasure of the body to offer them a warm welcome.
The gentlewoman from Fairfax, Ms. Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an announcement.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that the gentleman from Colonial Heights has given him my sports enthusiast seatmate his best birthday present, I hope you will now all join me in wishing our colleague a happy birthday.
I'm not sure how old he is, but he looks older. The gentleman from Manassas, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the gallery, we have a former Richmond Spider, Mr. Speaker, who just was a week or so ago elected to the Richmond Spiders Sports Hall of Fame, but now he's the president of a major corporation located here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that is Mr. Bruce Allen. And with Mr. Allen is an all-pro cornerback. For a defensive player, he is a touchdown machine. And as I'll say to our majority leader, when he was speaking about those Cowboys earlier, what have they done for you lately, Mr. Leader? What we have here today, Mr. Speaker, is we have the NFC East champion, D'Angelo Hall, and the president of the Redskins, Bruce Allen. If you all could stand up and if we could receive a warm house welcome.
We're delighted to have the Redskins with us today. Thank you. Gentleman from Richmond City, Mr. LaPace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the floor of the House today is former Lieutenant Governor John Hager. If you could give him a warm House welcome, please.
Delighted to have Governor Hager with us today. We thank you for coming. Are there further motions or resolutions under Rule 39?
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Roanoke, Mr.
Thank you,
Russell.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also on the floor with us today is former Delegate Futrell. If we can give him a warm house welcome. Thank you so much.
Delighted to have Delegate Futrell with us today. Thank you for coming. Gentleman from Suffolk, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has the floor.
Before I get to my remarks, I have to do the sports trifecta. Of course, I appreciate the majority leader not mentioning it through the 90s, being a shareholder of the Packers, that I think single-handedly Charles probably cost us the wild card game one year, the divisional playoffs the next year, and the championship game the next year, like 93, 94, 95. We did win it 96, but, as nice having his card to remind me of the pain he caused me back about 20 years ago. And then up in the gallery, we do have a gentleman from down in my neck of the woods, and I don't know if we should have clapped for him because he played for the other body in the basketball game a couple years ago. So I'm not sure if we had a better round of applause in the House or the Senate, but we need to get him to play for us this year or not play at all. Speaking, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I would like to point a personal privilege about the budget. For the 11 new members, Sunday will mark the release of our budget. And I say our budget. I have been honored for the last 3 sessions to chair the Committee on Appropriations. As most of you know, I normally don't use the word I or my in my conversations, but I do have that in the first part of this presentation for a couple of reasons. When the Speaker appointed me, I had a couple of goals that were very, very important after having listened to members that I considered friends of how I should approach my job. This is not my position, but it's the Commonwealth's position to make sure that we get a budget that makes sense. We just got through crossover, and we had a very productive first half of our session. Chairman Ware and I were seatmates many years ago, back in, I think, 2001, 2002. He and I were both appointed chairman at the same time, and I have made it a point to meet with him every week for the last 3 sessions. We have worked very closely together, and I think you have seen the result in our conservative budgets that have come out the last 2 years. Yesterday, Leader Toscano had some comments about what the governor had done when he introduced his budget back in December. We have attempted to have small group briefings to continue the process that was begun by my predecessor. We've worked very closely with the subcommittee chairs, met for an hour or so yesterday. Met with the conferees, I met individually with the subcommittee chairman, and I met individually with members, each member who has come by my office or I've come by your office. I want to thank Luke Torian for taking the lead and sitting down with every one of the Democratic members of his caucus and get their priorities on their budget amendments. The reason I mention that is because that involvement, that inclusion, I believe, has led the last 2 years to very conservative budgets that were not dramatically changed by the end of the day, end of the process. We look forward to, at 1 o'clock on Sunday in House Room D, presenting the budget once again. It will be a conservative and responsible budget. We have had, in the last 6 years, 5 years of surplus revenues due to that cooperation and conservative budgeting on spending. Last year's surplus, as you know, was the largest revenue surplus in our history. And I commend the governor and the Senate for being willing and equal partners in the process, working with us to meet certain objectives that we have all set out as members of this body. We, as a conferees, still have concerns with our economy vis-a-vis the withholding, but I think the governor was prudent and made the right call by not adjusting any of the mid-session revenues. He took, I think, business and corporate and sales down, but we're going to have fewer refunds, and we had more in recordation. So I think the right move was made in that regard. Our first priorities will be a structurally balanced budget without Washington-style gimmicks. And we need to make sure that our decisions put us, the Commonwealth, where we should be as a leader in the nation of conservative budgeting. We will be depositing $605 million in the state's rainy day fund. I would like to remind you that money was set aside 2 years and 1 year ago through the budget deal that we did in October. That's not an I, that's a we, that we collectively did. That will bring us, by the end of the biennium, to $845 million. And I want to commend Secretary Brown and his team for working with Betsy Daly and her team on the Senate Finance Committee and Robert Vaughn and his team on the House Appropriations Committee. Next, we will be fully funding, as you know, the state's annual contribution to the VRS for state employees 2 years early. That was released in the governor's budget, but he and I had sat down back last spring, knowing what the desires of this body was to meet that obligation a biennium early. We will be accelerating the $189 million repayment to VRS. Some took issue with what we did back in 2010. Back in 2010 was my first year as a conferee. Steve and I were, I think, the newbies that year. And we had to face a dramatic downturn in state revenues. We cut, as most of you know, for the first time in history, K-12. We had no choice. We made a decision back then not to make a payment to VRS. The prudent decision was made in the conference to say we would pay that back over a 10-year period with interest, 7%. I am pleased to announce today that in the budget that's coming out on Sunday, we will fully accelerate the $189 million repayment to VRS, 6 years ahead of schedule. We will. In the second year of our budget, we will be at 100% VRS for our teachers. So I want to commend each of you in this chamber who have been here and are here of putting that as a priority for us, because our state employees and our teachers are our most valuable asset because they allow us to deliver government to our constituents. As you know, the governor has increased and will be accelerating the elimination of the accelerated sales tax to 90% by the end of 2018. And as you might have seen in the budget bond bill that came out of the House, we were $1.5 billion versus $2.4 billion. So we're 40% less in that regard. And yesterday, the leader Toscano mentioned about the collar and how we should actually spend that, because we did put a quote-unquote collar on it. For those that were here 2 years ago, if you recall, where we got short-sheeted, so to speak, was that our non-withholding did not come in as we thought. So we were $400 million less there. So we had our issue to deal with during the summer and fall of 2014. So last year we put a collar, which had the surplus that we received news of last August. This year, we did the same thing. I think Gaker and the JB Board of Economists, they wanted to take a conservative approach to governance, and so their revenues have been restricted, or constricted probably is a better word. So what you'll see in our budget on Sunday, for every dollar above the self-imposed collar, up to what the forecast would have been, that's not required to be deposited to the rainy day fund, we're going to reduce the bond debt dollar for dollar. So if we have $500 million that is quote-unquote surplus, that does not have to go to the rainy day fund, that $500 million will reduce by $500 million the amount that we would borrow to build needed projects across the Commonwealth. Many who have been here since 2008 might recall we put $800 million back then in cash because of the economy to make sure that we did not end up in the second year of our budget with a deficit or a hole. I still have concerns about where we are as far as our economy. Sequestration did give us a 2-year hiatus. So what you have seen, or what you will see, what you've heard today and what you will see on Sunday, we will take the same approach the last 4 and 2 years for the next 2 years of being very conservative and parking cash to make sure that if, as Jimmy Massey likes to tell me all the time, if Mr. Market tells us something different, we are prepared for it. And that, I mean that sincerely, because that is our obligation. We don't print it, we have to earn it before we can spend it. And that's our obligation to the taxpayer in my regard, from my perspective. I'd like to thank each of you for coming by and sharing your thoughts with the committee members and with myself. As you see, north of here, 90 miles, they can barely pass a budget. And I'm pleased to say the last handful of years, except for a few dust-ups here or there, we've had pretty much unanimity when the budget comes out of this chamber. And I have been meeting with my counterparts. We met yesterday for a good extended period of time, and it's my hope that the success we've had for the last 2 to 4 years in having budgets where we can have more agreement than disagreement when they're released on Sunday will be evident by the fact that we don't worry about who gets credit. We want to take care of the state's business. So I thank you for your attention. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you on Sunday when we release the budget. Thank you so much for your time.
Are there further motions or resolutions under Rule 39? Clerk will call the calendar.
Calendar for the Virginia House of Delegates for today, Thursday, February 18th, 2016. Senate bills on third reading, regular calendar, page 1 of the printed version. Senate bills 49, 610 on page 2 of the printed version, and 715 have all been taken by for the day. Next up, House bills on third reading, uncontested calendar. House bills, third reading, uncontested calendar, 2 bills in the block. First bill, House Bill 859, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to sales and use tax exemption equipment used to make beer, and the other bill is House Bill 884.
Shall the bills pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, no 0.
Ayes 96, no 0. The bills are passed.
Continuing with the calendar, House bill on third reading, regular calendar. House Bill 339, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to recordation tax exemption. Report of the Committee on Finance.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 95, noes 1.
Ayes 95, noes 1. The bill is passed.
Turning to page 4 of the printed calendar, continuing, House bills on second reading regular. House bills on second reading regular calendar. First up, House Bill 298, a bill to amend and reenact 2 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to coal tax credits. Report for the Committee on Finance.
The gentleman from Scott, Mr. Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 298 is a coal tax credit bill. It limits the coal employment and production incentive tax to $7.5 million each year, and it extends the coal employment and production incentive tax from July 1st, 2016 to January 1st, 2020. Hope it be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? Those may favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1191, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to sales and use tax exemptions, certain items sold in local correctional facilities. Reported from the Committee on Finance.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Knight.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1191 allows correctional facilities to continue to not pay state taxes on prepared foods and tangible personal property sold in such facilities to the inmates. These profits stay within the facility for use by the sheriffs for the operation of the jail. Mr. Speaker, I move the House engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? Many in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1305, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia related to sales and use tax exemption and real and personal property tax exemption, solar and wind energy equipment, facilities, and devices. Report of the Committee on Finance with a substitute.
Gentleman from Manassas, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Questions on adoption of the committee substitute. As many as favor that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Substitute is agreed to. The gentleman from Manassas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill expands on a piece of legislation that Delegate Hugo carried in the 2014 session. What it does is it creates an 80% property tax exemption for basically solar projects that are 20 megawatts and higher. It would start on January 1st of 2017. We put a 7-year sunset clause on this. I move the bill be engrossed and pass on to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker.
The
Speaker.
gentleman from
Would the gentleman rise for yield for a question?
will the gentleman yield? Gentleman yield.
Mr. Speaker, just ask a gentleman. I'm trying to understand his fine bill here, I hope. Doesn't this also include the sales tax, which the localities and the state would lose on the sale of solar equipment?
Mr. Speaker, I'd say there is no fiscal impact to the state whatsoever with this bill. And yes, it could exempt for the locality any of the taxes that localities may be able to collect. It does have full support from VACO because where 20 megawatt style type projects will be created is where there's lots of land that's actually affordable. That's why it's probably one of the very few times that VACO would support a bill like this, taking away or creating tax exemptions on the locality's tax purposes. Because what will happen is wherever this type of a system or this size of solar operation will be created, will actually bring a lot of tax revenue, even at the 20%, with only 20% of it compared to what would be in an agricultural land use tax district.
Follow-up question, Mr. Speaker.
Will the gentleman yield?
Regarding the gentleman's last comment there on the local tax on the facility and equipment once it was installed, as I read lines 173, 174, this is a section of the bill that talks about certified pollution control equipment. And what that following few paragraphs do is omit the solar equipment from any local taxation. Is that what the gentleman's saying?
I would say 80% of taxation.
80%, very well. Final question, Mr. Speaker. Could the gentleman give us any estimates
Will the
of
gentleman
what
yield?
The overall?
I yield, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could the gentleman give us any estimate of the size of these tax credits that might accrue from the development of all this solar power?
No, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't. I don't know if they would build it right at 20 megawatts or much higher than 20 megawatts, and I have no idea what the different localities where this type of operation may build. I have no idea what their tax rates would be like. So what I would just reassure the gentleman is that, again, VACO is on board with this, and the reason VACO is on board is, again, one, it's optional per community, so any political subdivision could decide if they want to do this or not. And two, again, it would, even at the 20%, it's a heck of a lot more than 0% on what they'd be getting with what would basically be agricultural land use taxation.
I thank the gentleman.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Continuing with today's calendar, page 5 of the printed version, House Bill with a Senate amendment. House Bill 322, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to alcoholic beverage control, summary suspension of license in emergency circumstances, passed the House February 1st and passed the Senate with a substitute on February 16th.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Knight.
Mr. Speaker, this House Bill 322, when it went over to the Senate, it had 10 days for appeal by the licensee and 10 days for a final decision. The Senate moved it for 10 days and 10 days, which I view as a friendly amendment. So I would move the House approve the Senate amendment.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 92, noes 2.
Ayes 92, noes 2. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, that completes today's calendar.
Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
No communications, just this afternoon and tomorrow morning's meeting schedule. The Committee on General Laws will meet 1/2 hour after adjournment over in House Room C. The GAB, General Laws, 1/2 hour in C. House Commerce and Labor Committee will meet a 1/2 hour across the hall in House Room D, 1/2 hour after adjournment, Commerce and Labor. Then General Laws Subcommittee number 4 will meet immediately upon adjournment of the full committee in House Room C. The Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources Chesapeake Subcommittee is meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock in the 5th floor East Conference Room over in the GAB. The General Laws Subcommittee number 2 will meet 2 hours after adjournment of the full committee in House Room C, or presumably once Subcommittee number 4 is finished. Then at 4 o'clock as well today, Militia, Police, and Public Safety Subcommittee number 1, they'll be meeting up in the 8th floor West Conference Room. At the same time, 4 o'clock, Privileges and Elections Campaign Subcommittee. They'll be meeting down in 5th floor West Conference Room. Today's Appropriations, Comp, and Retirement Subcommittee has been canceled. The Fire and EMS Caucus will meet today at 4 o'clock in the 6th floor Speaker's Conference Room over in the GAB. The new Transparency Caucus will be meeting at 4 as well. They'll be in the 4th floor West Conference Room. That's a change in date for the Transparency Caucus. Then at 5 o'clock, the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus will meet at, like I said, at 5 in the 6th floor Senate Leadership Conference over in the GAB. Also remind the body that tonight is the Virginia Capital Foundation Gala, beginning at 6 o'clock in the Rotunda. For those who have not RSVP'd and want to attend, just see me. Looking ahead to tomorrow morning, Friday, February 19th, the Finance Subcommittee number 3 meeting has been canceled. So the first meeting tomorrow morning will be County, Cities, and Towns at 8 o'clock. County, Cities, and Towns will meet at 8 o'clock in House Room D on the 1st floor of the GAB. Similarly, Militia, Police, and Public Safety, that committee will be meeting at 8 a.m. across the hall in House Room C. This is a change in the start time for MIPS. Ben Franklin Liberty Caucus also will be meeting at 8 tomorrow morning in the 5th floor West Conference Room. The New American Caucus meeting tomorrow, that's been canceled. The Capital Regional Caucus will be meeting, however, at 8 o'clock up in the 8th floor West Conference Room. Then at 9 o'clock, the Tourism Caucus will be meeting in the 5th floor West Conference Room. That's a change in time for tourism, but it'll be at 9 in 5 West. The Committee on Privileges and Election, that meeting's been canceled. P&E will not be meeting. Therefore, the caucuses will be meeting. Democratic Caucus at 9:30 in House Room 2, and the Republican Caucus at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow in House Room 1, both here in the Capitol. Please announce I have at this time.
Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. So many in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Speaker, I move the House to now adjourn.
The gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox, moves the House to now adjourn. As many in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.